Hello, my name is Matthew, and I know that it's been a long time since I've made a video, and I know that I've let people down. I've seen um, all the comments since my last video, which I don't get notifications, so um, it certainly is heartwarming, and I feel an obligation to um, respond to the comments that I've gotten. Um, but I've read a lot of really great books this year. I've had, since my last video, which was a few months ago, um, just a tremendous amount of really great reading experiences. Um, I have not been compelled to make videos, which I certainly um, do apologize for anyone that um, enjoys these videos. But one of my favorite writers, or one of the contemporary writers that fascinates me, is Michel Houellebecq, and um, I've known that he's had a new book out for about 2 years. Came out in France, and about 6 months ago, maybe 7 months ago, something like that. Um, I knew that the translated English version of Annihilation, Michel Houellebecq's new book, was coming out. I pre-ordered it. I was really looking forward to it. Um, it actually came late. I was quite anxious about this book arriving, and I finished it last night, and I've actually um, been thinking about my reading experience, and I mentioned I've had a lot of really good reading experiences, and this is the first book in a long time where there were so many things, Stephanie, uh, so many curiosities and strange things about this book that I've been thinking about, that I wanted to try to make a video discussion talking about this book, and I hope I do a good job because I'm a bit rusty. So this is the book Annihilation by Michel Houellebecq, and I've read all of his novels. I've read his novella Lanzarote, a good handful of his selected essays, some nonfiction. Um, I feel like close to a completist. He's one of the contemporary writers that I do certainly follow. I have a very small handful of contemporary writers that I pre-order and get and have and read right away. This has been a good season for that. Last month, the new Will Self book, Elaine, came out, which, if I feel like I'm getting my stride or getting my confidence, I might make a video about that. Next month, the new Haruki Murakami English translated version of that will be coming out. But I just read Annihilation by Michel Houellebecq, and I do want to go into the plot, but the curiosities, the strange aspects, the unbalanced portions, the things that, as I was reading the book, little details that I found baffling and strange, and not really understanding the pace and the rhythm, and certainly the choice of the decisions that the translator made. And I should mention, this is translated by Sean Whiteside, which I know has at least translated one other work by Houellebecq, maybe Submission or Serotonin. I can't quite remember, but it's decidedly clunky. The translation really very apparently feels either hurried or unobserved. The main reason I can mention that is just simply the amount of typos, really obvious, apparent errors that an editor really should have caught for a major author and publication that should not have made it into like a $30 hardback. But there's other things that are so curious about this book, and like I said, I do want to get into the plot, but I was reading this book, and I get to page 13, and page 11 or 12, there is a mention of a guillotine. And so I turn the page, and I get this wonderful diagram of a guillotine. And I think, okay, well that's certainly interesting. Very well done diagram of a guillotine, and it specifies the different instruments that put together a guillotine. And then maybe like 10 pages later or 20 pages later or something, I get another illustration of something. I'm not going to look it up. But then like 100 pages go by, and there's no more illustrations. So it's not as if it's this illustrated companion to the book where we're going to get illustrations often. And it's so arrhythmic where you might have another illustration 150 pages, and it's a fairly long book. I mean, it's 500 some pages, so maybe not long, but meaty. And you have a whole middle section where you're not really getting any illustrations, and they'll start popping up again. So that's fair. Nothing too alarming or anything, but it's not an illustrated book where you're going to have insets and different things. Okay. You get 20, 30 pages into the book, and then you get a footnote where you have a typographical symbol, and then at the bottom of the page, there's a footnote. And there's a precedent for that, obviously, in literature, of novels having footnotes. I think the most famous example, at least with endnotes, would be things by David Foster Wallace, For Good or Ill. But also, you certainly have older poems that would have glosses, those notes that would run on the side of the page. But this whole book only has one footnote, and it has no reason for being there. It doesn't really add too much to the story. It's not a stylistic choice that runs throughout the book. The idea of like stylistic continuity, it doesn't quite make sense. The other part of this book is that it's set in 1927, which I feel like is such a strange choice. It's not set in the past. It is set in the future, but it's 2024 right now. The book maybe came out in France 4 years ago, so still kind of in the very, very recent future, or upcoming future. that there is an explanation that involves prime numbers, but still, it's just very, very close. On top of that, the book takes about 150 pages. I had read some review or publicity about the contents of the book prior to actually reading it, so there were things that I knew going in. And so I'm reading it knowing the book is set in 2027, and I'm turning the pages and thinking, okay, when is it going to mention this? And it's like 150 pages until it actually comes up that it's set in the very, very recent or upcoming future, which I just found peculiar. There are dream sequences. We have a main character, Paul, which, if I have time, I'll get into, where without preparation, without setting up that we're going to have a dream sequence, you end up in these portions where all of a sudden things don't make logical sense, and there's activities and things that stretch the bounds of physical reality. There's a wonderful elevator scene, and I have a bias. I'm really not a fan of any description of a dream, reading a book, or a real life conversation, because it's so inconsequential. It has no bearing on reality, so it's going to be something that is not tying into any kind of story, whether it's a friend telling me they had some really interesting dream or in a book. And again, it's so sporadic and unbalanced and hard to understand why it's there. And I bring all these things up because as I was reading the book, these were things that I was noticing and not quite finding as negatives, but really curious choices that made me investigate the reading, investigate the experience. Like, why are these things happening in this way? So, with these odd little details, I'll try to get into some of the aspects of the plot, and then also at the end, I'd like to go into what part of this book made me want to go through making a video. And of course, we're set in France, primarily Paris, but also regions of Paris. And as you go through the book, my reaction was, what kind of book am I reading? Is it a story of a family? Is it a political espionage thriller? Is it a social commentary? Is it science fiction? It felt as if I could never really quite get my bearings on this story, and I certainly was fascinated. I mean, it was a good read as far as turning the page. we meet a main character named Paul. He's going to be our central antagonist or protagonist. And we learn about his life in 2027. He's a civil servant, fairly high position, fairly good political connections. His immediate boss is the minister of, or the president of the ministry of something, a very Kafkaesque bureaucratic position of power. And there's an election, there's a political campaign, and we learn that his boss has these dealings where he's looking into the future, and he knows he can only have so many official seats, winning an election in a row, and so he's going to put in a stooge that's going to be there for a certain amount of years, and then afterwards he can go and run for re-election again and get back into the same spot that he was in. We spend a lot of time going into this, and the very beginning of the book has these striking, very prescient images, and also prescient technological abilities, where there's this unknown, or rather mysterious, terrorist organization that has utilized AI. And so Paul's boss, this president of the ministry of whatever, is shown in a YouTube video, or a variant of YouTube, some sort of social media platform, of being guillotined. That goes back to the guillotine that I showed as an illustration, where he very obviously was not guillotined. And we go into very precise description of how this sort of AI would work to make a video like this. And as it goes along, we see more and more terrorist activity, with boats being missiled or rocketed. There's a sperm bank that's blown up. Different things on the world stage are happening, and we have the whole world involved in these sorts of things. At the same time, Paul's father has a stroke, something like a stroke, and he goes into a coma. He finally comes out of it. He has to be hospitalized. We learn about his family. We learn about the sad state of his marriage. He lives with a woman he's been married to for over 10 years, but they don't speak. They cross like ships in the night. They sleep in separate rooms. It devolves to their relationship is separated by the shelves in the refrigerator. He has his spot in the fridge. She has her spot in the fridge. But he's interested in his career and his position and his boss. He wants to, Paul, the main character, is trying to have relationships with his family that are all relatively distant. He's just trying to do right. What's the right thing to do? His father is in the book is deemed by some of the more pejorative um, family members in law as a vegetable, and all these things are going on. It feels like a big book, and it also feels like a deep book because Houellebecq is bringing in history and the occult and religion and life and death, literature. Balzac is mentioned. Pascal has a reoccurring um, notice throughout the book, and there are things that happen. We find out relatively what's going on with the terrorist organization. Strangely, in the middle of the book, and this kind of comes back to my bafflement and curiosity as I'm reading it. We have like a world stage political thriller, and then we focus on a rather madcap, almost jailbreak, where the father who's in a hospital that, um, while comatose, is being mistreated and is not being taken care of, and Paul and family members um, kind of going to the black market to find people that can break out his father of this out of the hospital to get him back to the house, back to safety, set up ulterior modes of taking care of him, getting a medical bed installed in the house, getting the stairway set up, and the book is not without darkness by any means. We have murder and suicide and betrayal and bleakness and darkness. There's a thread throughout the book because we start with Paul's loveless marriage with his wife, and I felt like it was one of the most powerful threads throughout the book, which is a slow rebuilding of trust and tenderness and tentative, careful love that builds with the husband and wife relationship, which I found towards the end of the book quite moving, and also as some of the other family members that have some explosive scenes. We find that there's an answer to what's going on with the mysterious terrorist organization, the political strategizing that Paul's boss had set up with the involvement of Paul and other characters, goes their way. So we're seeing real life situations with his family. We're seeing a growth within his marriage. We're seeing the at least security of his career, and all the while throughout the book, like I said, sort of this rocky boat with very odd, strange decisions, which I'm certainly a fan of strange books, but I haven't really wrapped my head around this one. Paul had a toothache, and we get to the last leg of the book, and he goes to the dentist office. We were like 100 pages away from the book, and he goes to the dentist office, and we have like a Balzacian description of the interaction with him and the dentist, and being in the dentist chair. And this book takes a wild turn, something that I could not have expected. Tragedy and body horror and real life horror, horror that doesn't involve ghosts and goblins, but real horror. And his life goes from worldwide politics and worldwide terrorism, and his career and family and all of these externals. And there's a moment where the whole world collapses on him in a way that is startling and striking, and terminates the book. There is a real annihilation, and it is terrifying. I put the book down. The last 100 pages or so, I couldn't put down. And then when I finally did put the book down, I was aghast. And I feel like this might be Houellebecq's strongest novel. It might also be his most flawed novel. I feel like the translation does not do it justice. Of course, I don't speak French, so I don't really have a place to say that, except that there were some errors that were too obvious to overlook. But this is a book, recommendation or not, certainly compelled me to try to make one of these videos again. So those are some of my thoughts on Annihilation by Michel Houellebecq. I tried to not have spoilers and things like that, just because it's a new release, I suppose. So if you have any thoughts, please leave a comment below, and thank you for watching.